And welcome to another episode of LaTour Retirement Talk. I'm your co-host, Tony Shore, and I'm here with our hosts. Yes, they are both here today. It's going to be a good show. That's how you know both Jim and Josh are here. That's Jim Margraf and Josh LaTour. How you guys doing today?
Oh, we're doing pretty good, Tony.
How was that intro? Okay, you're kind of laughing.
That was good.
I like it.
I like it. That was
I don't know. I don't know. Trying to bring a little energy, and
There
you
you go.
guys are looking excited and bright today. This is good.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I mean, we're going to be here recording for a little bit, so we need to, at least have some energy going while we're sitting here talking, right?
Yep. Well, you guys deal with a lot of paperwork and a lot of numbers, and I appreciate you guys loosening up a bit for the show and bringing some of your wisdom to the kids out there listening. We have listeners from of all ages, from kids to seniors who are, in retirement, right?
Well, Tony, everybody needs to plan for retirement. So if you've started working, it's time to start planning.
Yeah.
So I sat down with someone this morning. They've just recently changed jobs and had gotten married and bought a house last year. And they said, we need to start planning now. And so we had an appointment this morning, and we're trying to get them off on the right foot and get started with their plans. So when they do reach the age where they want to say goodbye to that final paycheck, they're ready.
Awesome. Yeah. I think that's great. And that's what you guys do there. You've helped so many people in the community with that. Now, the show today is called Beneficiary 101.
Right.
But I know that a lot of what you want to talk about today is inheriting, being the beneficiary, inheriting something like an IRA, how to deal with an inherited IRA, because there are so many ins and outs. But it all starts with that beneficiary designation, doesn't it, Jim?
Yeah, it does, Tony. What we put on those beneficiary forms is so very, very important. And you're right. That is where it starts.
Yeah. People oftentimes make the mistake of not making sure things are up to date. And so there ends up not being able to pass on the way they want it to. And that's where you run into the horror stories of probate and things like that, because they didn't do what they were supposed to do in the first place. And that's make sure their beneficiary forms were up to date so that we can actually have a show about how to inherit funds. So
yeah, it all starts there. And I think we need to point out, and we've mentioned this on past shows, you guys told me about this and have told our listeners, but it bears repeating that a beneficiary designation on an account like an IRA or 401k, an insurance policy, those take precedent over what you have in your will. So I think a lot of people get confused. They don't change. They don't pay any attention to their beneficiary designations years down the road. And they say, oh, I need to update my will, but they don't update their beneficiaries. And it's gone all the way to the Supreme Court, right?
Oh, yeah.
It has.
It's gone to the Supreme Court so many times. I don't know why anybody challenges it anymore.
Right.
The court has always ruled in favor of the beneficiary form. If there's a disagreement between the beneficiary form and a will or a trust, the beneficiary form comes out on top.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe it's just the attorney who's wanting to, make his $1,000 an hour while he's doing this, but it's really a useless challenge anymore because they've been very consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. So beneficiary designations on your various accounts are very important. Keep them up to date. And anytime there's a major life event, right? Like a marriage, a birth, a death, a divorce especially has been a big one that's really thrown a lot of people off. So that is important. I'm glad we talked about that. But what's the main topic you want to hit on today?
Well, the main topic, Tony, is actually inheriting these funds. So somebody passes away and you are the beneficiary. What do you do now? Because there's a lot of rules that can fall into place depending on what type of account it was. And you want to make sure you can kind of weed through all these rules. And honestly, you need a financial professional to help you with it. Because I have seen people make mistakes, and we'll talk about a few of those as we go throughout today's show. But to start with, we're going to start talking about inherited IRAs, also called beneficiary IRAs. And that is when a person passes on the IRA. Now, there's different ways that those are treated depending on who inherits them. Spouses are treated entirely different from anybody else. The spouse actually ends up having some nice features. They get a lot of options. So a spouse can turn it into their own IRA. They can have it as an inherited IRA and have a 10-year rule. Now, everybody else is subject to that 10-year rule except for a few qualifying people. Basically, that means they have to take these IRA funds out of that IRA and pay the taxes on them within a 10-year period. So used to be, we had this stretch IRA, but as of the passing of the Secure Act back in 2020, that took that away and it introduced the 10-year rule. So now there's a much shorter time frame that people have to get funds out of these pre-tax accounts.
Yeah. So I'm glad you pointed it out too. So spouses and like if I inherit an IRA from my parents, that's a whole different set of rules than if I inherit an IRA from my spouse, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a very different set of rules, Tony. And, when we look at people that inherit funds from a parent, and that's usually how it happens most of the time, right? You inherit some from the previous generation passes, and then you would inherit those funds. A lot of times what's happening is on those IRAs, they're already taking the required minimum distributions from those funds. And so when you inherit that, those funds, if you want to leave it invested in that IRA, you can, but there are some rules you have to follow. So if they're already taking those distributions, you have to continue with those distributions. You can't just leave it all there. And so you have to start.
So no matter how old you are?
Correct. It does not matter. Because
so if the person I inherited it from was my grandfather and he'd been taking distributions for quite a while, he passed at 101. So he had been taking distributions from that, he had been taking RMDs, required minimum distributions, but he passed, I inherit it, and it doesn't matter if I'm not 72 or 73 yet.
Nope.
It's okay.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Basically what they say is once you turn on the faucet of those RMDs, it can never, ever be shut off. And so you have to continue taking them.
And is that for a spouse or a non-spouse or both?
So for a spouse, things are a little bit different because they can.
I didn't mean to jump ahead. I just was
no, not
curious.
at all. I think that's a great question. A spouse can turn it into their own IRA, and so their own rules are going to be observed, whereas it's not necessarily an inherited account anymore.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense.
So where a lot of people run into trouble is they inherit those funds and they're under the required age to start taking those RMDs, and they don't think about it. Right. And so then you end up with a penalty because you miss a required minimum distribution. You say, but wait, I'm only, 57 years old. I don't have to take RMDs yet. On an inherited IRA, if that had already started, you have to continue. Now, here's the other thing. When by the time we reach 10 years, that IRA, that inherited IRA, has to be completely empty. So we have a 10-year window to empty that IRA and pay all the taxes on those funds. That's what we have now. It's what the IRS gives us, is a 10-year window. So I've told some people, I said, listen, you're already in a pretty high tax bracket, and you're going to be for this entire 10-year duration. Don't leave all of them, the majority of the money there till the last year. You're going to want to perhaps take a little more than the scheduled RMD. Maybe take 10% out each year so that you don't get stuck with a massive distribution at the end and a larger tax bill to accompany it.
Right. Yeah, I actually met with somebody just the other day whose father passed away, and he was not at age 73 yet. So he was not taking required minimum distributions, but the recommendation is still, well, maybe we don't let this grow all the way till the 10th year and take it all out and then have a giant taxable distribution all in 1 year. you can split this over that 10 years and kind of lessen that overall tax burden. Because if you wait till the 10th year, odds are it may grow to a point where it throws you into either at least the next highest tax bracket or even higher than that.
Sure.
So these are things that you want to consider.
You know, especially considering that most people are in the 12% tax bracket, though that's a large majority of the population is in that 12% tax bracket for those married filing jointly. Some are then into the 22. But if you're going to inherit a larger IRA, and let's say you're inheriting, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, so and if you leave that, as in the case Josh was just talking about, you leave that till the 10th year, that's a big tax ouch, if you know what I mean. That's that's going to hurt, because you're going to put yourself up several tax brackets, and you're going to get to keep a much smaller portion of those IRA funds because of it. So the goal here with thinking about our distributions is how much of this do we get to keep?
Right.
After the IRS takes their portion.
Yeah. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And obviously everybody wants to minimize that tax burden. But taxes might be one of the biggest expenses people face anyway in retirement. You really don't want to blow it when it comes to an inherited IRA and how that's going to fit into your overall financial plan. You don't want to be bumped up into a higher tax bracket, right? That could increase your Medicare payments, right? It could affect how much of your Social Security will be taxed. I mean, you really have to watch these things, and I wouldn't want to deal with this without working with financial professionals like yourselves who are looking at the big picture and about this planning, right?
Oh, absolutely, Tony. I think that's so key, is to make sure you have the right people on your side when it comes to things like this, because there's so many pitfalls that you can end up falling for if you don't have the right people. Now, I mentioned that back in 2020, the passing of the Secure Act is what introduced this 10-year rule. Usually anytime they introduce a new rule, they change the rule, there's some exceptions. So we already mentioned the spousal exception. A spouse is not subject to that 10-year rule like everybody else is. But there are a few others, and I just wanted to kind of quickly brush over those as well. So the exceptions to the 10-year rule would be, goodness, I lost my place. I'm sorry. The exceptions to the 10-year rule would be beneficiaries that are within 10 years of the decedent's age, or not more than 10 years younger. So if they're less than 10 years younger than the person who passed away, or they're older, they are not subject to that 10-year rule. They're able to stretch those required minimum distributions over their lifetime.
So an example of that would be siblings.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's say we have someone who doesn't have any children and they make their brother or sister a beneficiary, then they're going to have that exception to the 10-year rule, as long as they're less than 10 years younger.
Right. Sure. And so when somebody has that 10-year rule, the people that it does apply to, they might want to spread out the payments over that time period, because you might not want to pay it all at once, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely, Tony. Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, you have some options with what you do when you inherit an IRA and you're subject to the 10-year rule. One, you can roll it over into an inherited IRA itself from the custodian where it was at, or even with that particular custodian, and open an inherited IRA. Or you can actually take the funds out all at once if you want to, and just pay the taxes at that time. Sometimes
you can cash it out.
You can cash it out. Yeah, and if it's a smaller account, maybe that's going to be the best thing for you. A lot of times with a larger account, you're not going to want to do that, just for the reasons we've just stated.
Right, because it's a joint account with Uncle Sam. It's not all yours. So, so if it's a traditional IRA and you inherit it, a good 30% of that could be Uncle Sam. So if you have, say, $100,000 in an inherited IRA, you can't cash out and get 100,000. You could maybe get 70 in a lot of cases. You're only going to get 20, 30%, right?
That's exactly right, Tony.
Or they're going to take 20 or 30.
Yeah. You're only going to get about 70% of that, most likely.
Yeah.
Now,
wow.
I want to give a word of caution here when you're inheriting funds like this. And there's different ways that you can transfer funds. We've talked about it before on the show. There's the 60-day rollover, and then there's a direct transfer. 60-day rollovers do not work with inherited funds.
Right.
That is a big deal, because if you try to do a 60-day rollover, and how that works, Tony, is you take the funds into your bank account and then you try to put them back into the IRA within a 60-day period, you cannot put funds back into an inherited IRA. Therefore, what you just took out is fully taxable. And if it's a large chunk, that's going to hurt a lot. We actually had a client do this. She wasn't doing it with us, but she told us about it afterward. And it definitely hurt on the taxes, because it was a big chunk of money, and it was all taxable at the same time because she didn't understand the rules. So make sure when you're dealing with inherited funds, if you're trying to transfer it from one place to another, make sure you do a direct transfer.
Yeah, this is a definite IRS gotcha.
It is.
And it'll catch you off guard thinking, oh, I can just do a 60-day rollover and transfer the funds out like I would any other IRA. No. Yeah, this one will catch you off guard. So don't do the 60-day rollover. Make sure it's direct. Right. Direct is the best way. 99% of the time, it seems. So I highly encourage going that way for any type of tax qualified transfer of funds. But for this, you pretty much have to do it that way. It's required.
That's huge. So important to know. Again, it seems like there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through just to inherit an IRA these days, right?
There really is. It's unfortunately kind of convoluted, and I guess we have Congress to thank for that. But
the IRS tax code. Wow.
Right. Yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah, there are a lot to look at, but as Josh was mentioning, there's a couple of exceptions, and I wanted to look at another one, and the other one is minor children.
Right.
So if someone is under age of majority, then they're not subject to that 10-year rule. And so they get to stretch those payments out. So that's a big help on those funds.
Yeah.
For minor children.
Now, a caveat to that,
right?
They get to stretch it, quote, over their lifetime, only until age of majority. Once they reach age of majority, then their 10-year window starts.
What's age of majority?
Most states 18.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
So there is they word the rule a little bit funny because they say over the lifetime.
Right.
However, the minor child's lifetime for this ends at age of majority, and we switch rules.
Right. So they get a little bit longer of a window, essentially, to have to take out these taxable dollars.
Then the other one that gets the exception is the disabled or the chronically ill.
Sure.
Right. So, and that's a huge benefit for them, because for them, it becomes a payment for their lifetime to help with medical expenses, really. Yeah. So Congress, I like the fact that they left them with the exception. That's a great benefit.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So there are exceptions, and so that leads me to say I've got to believe that regardless, those are the exceptions. But if you do inherit an IRA, your personal situation still makes a big difference, right? You have to.
It does.
In what strategy you use, right?
Oh, it absolutely does, Tony. Yeah, you have to take into consideration what your needs are. You're inheriting these funds. I like to tell people, when you inherit money, you can allow it to change your life, or you can allow yourself to maybe just have a good time for a short period of time. And so it can be life-changing if you treat it right. And so making sure that you've set up the right strategy and have a plan for these funds, because now they've become your funds.
Right.
And so they need to work for you in the best way possible. So working with a financial provider, a services professional that can help you construct a plan for what you're going to need to do with these funds. And a lot of that has to do with how you're going to take them out of the taxable accounts. And some of it may have to do with how you're going to set up your retirement in the future. So making sure that you're working with a financial professional that can help all those steps along the way is important.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that, things like your age, you mentioned earlier, your age makes a big difference. Your relationship to the account holder, RMDs, whether they've started or not. There are so many variables here. I can't even fathom keeping track of them all on my own. And this is where you guys come in. You've done this a lot. I'm sure you've helped a lot of people over the years there at LaTour, helping people with inherited IRAs and things like this, right?
Yeah, we do help a lot of people with that. Unfortunately, when we are helping people who are retiring, a lot of times you run into the passing of a spouse.
Right.
So I just dealt with one of those cases yesterday, and as sad as it is, and the problem, it's so you lose a spouse, but now all of a sudden you've got all these finances that you've got to deal with.
Right.
And so one, you're in your mental state because you're have the loss of the spouse, you're grieving, so you're already overwhelmed with all of it, and now you're faced with these complicated IRS rules that we've got to deal with, and the big question is, what do I do? I can't even think my way through it. Right. I remember I go back to when as my mom was passing, my dad had something that he had to do, and because of the grief of it all, something that was commonplace, something he'd been doing for 20 years, he couldn't even think his way through because of the effect that grief has on your mind. And so, he comes over, he says, Jim, I need help with this. He said, I can't think. And, I walked over and I helped him out with it. And it just took me not even a minute to, here's what you do. I laid it out. Boom, here, help you with it. Done. And he's like, is that all it was? I'm like, yeah, don't worry about it. You're in a situation that's extremely tough. So that's where we as financial advisors can help out, because we get into the rules and we go for training twice a year on IRAs to make sure we stay current with what Congress is doing with IRAs. Absolutely. And so this is where we can help people that are going through this difficult time. Now, what do I do with this? And help them answer those questions.
Well, yeah, and there are a lot of questions to be asked here. I mean, you guys have covered a lot. And taxes are the big factor here, and minimizing that tax burden when it comes to inheritances. And I just would not do this without working with a team of professionals like yourselves. And you work alongside tax professionals there, and you're looking at the big picture. You're looking at those personal details. A lot of times, something that another question I had is, what if Grandpa worked for years for 3M, big company, had a lot of stock, let's say. Some people might say, well, we should keep what's in that IRA. He liked that stock. But it's not a good idea just to keep what he had out of nostalgia, right?
I absolutely agree with that, Tony.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I have seen that a lot, where people keep a stock nostalgically. And sometimes it's a great thing, depending on what the stock is. Grandpa had a lot of Amazon stock, and well, it's done us really well. So that's one thing. But just keeping it in something that maybe did well, 40 years ago, but now we're in a different environment, and that company is just not doing well anymore. Don't hold on to those old investments purely for nostalgia. If he has like a share certificate or something like that, a stock certificate, and you want to frame that, absolutely be nostalgic with that. But
sure,
this is when we're talking about real money. Let's be realistic and let's be smart with it. And so making sure that it's set up in the best way for you now as the inheritor, I think is wise. Now, regarding inheriting stock, let's say it's not in a 401k plan or something like that. It's just straight non-qualified shares of stock.
So it's not in a traditional IRA or 401k or Roth IRA, something like that.
Exactly. Let's say, so you do inherit that stock.
Sure.
You get a step up in cost basis.
Yes.
Which I think that's a huge deal. That's something that helps you out a whole lot on taxes, because you didn't pay what Grandpa paid for it, or your cost basis isn't what Grandpa paid for it anymore. Let's say he bought O'Reilly stock back, 20 years ago, and it was $15 a share. and now it's, well, it just split 15 ways, but it was up to almost $1,500 a share.
Wow.
So a huge taxable difference there,
Right.
a huge capital gain that you would have. But when you inherit it at the new amount, at the new value. So you no longer have that giant capital gain. So that's a huge
so
benefit.
you don't have to pay the taxes on the gains that he made.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, it's very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's good.
Well, one more thing, Tony, that I wanted to mention that we kind of skipped right over it is Roth IRAs.
Yes.
Inheriting Roth. Now, there's still a 10-year rule when it comes to Roth, but there's never a requirement to take out any required minimum distributions out of the Roth because there are no required minimum distributions on
Roths don't have
Roth.
them. Nope.
Congress doesn't care if you take money out of that because they don't get anything for it because there's no taxes. So there's no requirement there. So the recommendation, generally speaking, when you inherit a Roth, even though you have a 10-year rule, leave it in there for the 10 years as long as you can because it's growing tax-free that whole 10 years.
Right.
And then take it out. And after that, it becomes non-qualified money that the gains would be taxable on. But during that 10 years, you don't have to pay any taxes on any of those gains. So utilize that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That makes sense because you're not going to have to pay taxes along the way, or when it comes out, it's tax-free, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And, we all love it when we get this group of dollars and the IRS doesn't have a big part of that. So if it's not a joint account with the IRS, we're in favor of that. So let's leave it at that's why he said, leave it there as long as possible because they don't get to take anything out of it. So let's keep that tax deferral, that growing tax-free. Let's keep that going as long as we can. Now, if you do need then you can take it out. But if you can leave it, then let's do so.
Yeah. Makes sense. Well, hey, we're out of time. It just flew by. So before we go, let our listeners and viewers know how they can get a hold of you to set up a meeting, because the bottom line is you got to have a plan that incorporates all this.
Absolutely, Tony. Well, listeners, just give us a call. Our number's 417-641-3497. We'd be happy to sit down with you, help you put a plan together to make sure that you're going to be okay in retirement as you're inheriting funds from the previous generation. Again, give us a call.
All right. Sounds good. And listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of LaTour Retirement Talk with our hosts, Jim Margraf and Josh LaTour.